Hello and welcome to this short video where I will show you how to survive in Thrive by eating hydrogen sulfide. Now, hydrogen sulfide can be consumed through one protein and one kind of organelle. So the chemosynthesizing protein, like all other proteins, produces a tiny bit of ATP through glycolysis, so it consumes a little bit of glucose, though it's really negligible. But the big thing is that through chemosynthesis, it converts 0.07 hydrogen sulfide into 0.04 glucose. And that is how you will get glucose for that energy, rather than finding it in the environment. Though you can still supplement yourself with glucose that you find just laying around. Now the organelle equivalent is the chemoplast, which consumes 0.14 hydrogen sulfide per second and will create 0.09 glucose per second, so it's a bit more efficient. Now, rather than builds such as just a straight up metabolism or mitochondria build, which just takes glucose that you get through the environment or hunting or whatever and just converts it into energy, or the rustocyanin build, where it's just you take iron and convert that straight to energy. A build that relies on hydrogen sulfide is a bit closer to a plant build in terms of things have to be transferred in order to get the glucose into energy. So what I mean by this is like the chloroplast uses sunlight to produce glucose, but this organelle itself does not produce energy. It's merely getting the glucose. So just like the chemoplast, it doesn't actually create energy by itself. It creates glucose by taking something from the environment, hydrogen sulfide, and converting it into glucose. Because of this, you will need to have metabolisms or mitochondria so that you can utilize all the glucose that you're getting. Looking at the patch map, there are only two patches that have hydrogen sulfide. There is the volcanic vents that you start in with a very good 12% hydrogen sulfide, and then you have the underwater cave which has only 4.5% hydrogen sulfide, but everywhere else is just 0% across the board. So if you're making a build that's going to rely heavily on hydrogen sulfide, you pretty much have to stay in the vents the entire time. Though, lucky for you, you start in the vents. And if you were to do an underwater cave build, you'd likely have to rely on a hybrid build between an iron-eating cell and the hydrogen sulfide, have those supplement each other. And even then, you'd probably still need to do a bit of hunting or find glucose in the environment to stay alive. But for the purposes of this video, I will be staying in the volcanic vent because it is just the best spot for hydrogen sulfide. Like 12% is really good actually for a compound. Like, if you're looking through all these different zones, I mean, you get like 4%, 3%, 6%, but yeah, the only thing that's even close, actually is iron up here in the ice shelf is at 12%. So yeah, this is the place you want to be. So to start off, we'll basically do what I always do with cells in these videos. And so in the first generation, you'll want to have just 2 metabolisms. Get that ATP production up. In the subsequent generation, what you'll want to do is take some chemosynthesizing proteins and just add those on. As you can see, there's a little bit of ATP production because of glycolysis, but that's just really just offsetting the osmoregulation costs that they have. Like, they're not nearly as efficient as metabolisms or even cytoplasm. Just straight up, cytoplasm's almost twice as effective. Once you have a little cell like this, you'll see that the compound balances, so you're making a positive amount of glucose, but that's only while you have hydrogen sulfide in your cell. And that is because hydrogen sulfide is being consumed constantly at a steady rate. So out in the environment of the volcanic vents, you'll just want to do what you normally do, finding phosphate and ammonia. And at this stage, with how small your cell is, you can get away with not even finding food within your lifetime and be fine. That might not be the best thing for your subsequent generation. So here we have some hydrogen sulfide. And pick that you'll notice in the bottom left that the hydrogen sulfide is being consumed at a rapid pace and the glucose is going up, despite the glucose being used for anything like movement or just osmoregulation keeping us alive. And so you can see how effective this can be, and much like iron, you can store a sufficient amount of hydrogen sulfide that can actually extend the amount of glucose that you've got for quite a bit. So if I fill it up all the way, so now you see the hydrogen sulfide is being consumed a bit slower, but it's practically like I've got a second glucose bar. Now, it's not nearly as efficient as just normal glucose, but it definitely extends the life of your cell before you have to find more stuff to eat. Now, with a subsequent generation, I would suggest getting a flagellum just for the speed boost, because speed just really is key to getting places in a reasonable time frame. And so that costs 55 mutation points, which should leave you 45 left over to get a chemoreceptor, which will be very important for this kind of build. And you'll want to have that looking for hydrogen sulfide at all times. And one really good thing about the volcanic vents is that there is just a ton of ammonium phosphate laying around, more than any other environment. And especially in the early game, it is a very good place to be and evolve quite a bit. But as a hydrogen sulfide eater, you don't need to solely, seek out hydrogen sulfide, even though it's a good thing to do. And by the late game, you will be relying on it. You can just see all the different glucose clouds around and use those. After 2 more generations of adding on more metabolisms and moving them around a little bit to save some mutation points later on, you can finally get a nucleus once you have enough ATP production to support one. Though it can be tricky getting it to fit in. So if we just move these here. Now, I was slowly moving these out beforehand, but it costs about 5 ATP to do... not 5 ATP. 5 mutation points to do so. And when you're getting 2 metabolisms, that adds up to 10 mutation points that you can use just to move stuff around with those 2 generations. So it's wise to sort of get things moving in the right direction as quickly as possible, so that you can get the nucleus in and get everything moved to the right spot. And with the nucleus, this unlocks all the different organelles where you can get things done more efficiently. So what you'll want to do is with each subsequent generation, you'll want to replace your metabolisms with mitochondria, so that's 1 generation. This would be 2 generations. And then you can probably even get 1 here, 1 here, get rid of the extra metabolisms, so that's another 1, 2, 3 generations. And this is the point where you have the moment of truth, so you get rid of your chemosynthesizing proteins and replace them with proper chemoplasts. And once you obtain that, and that will take 1 generation to replace those. Yeah, get rid of... hold up. To get rid of one of these at 10, so you'd only be able to get 1 done in a generation, so it would take 2 generations to do that. But once you had a cell like this, just take it out, and it can do pretty well for itself. So it's consuming a decent amount of glucose, but it's doing so very efficiently, and any hydrogen sulfide you're picking up is being made into more glucose. And I will say, hydrogen sulfide, much like iron, it's somewhat difficult to rely solely on it. It is something that's very much good whenever you're supplementing it with something else like iron, or like just any glucose clouds around. The glucose clouds, as the game goes on with each subsequent generation, get a bit more difficult to find. But you can also rely on just hunting other cells a little bit. Because hydrogen sulfide, while you can make a build that just solely relies on it, it does tend to do a lot better if you're doing a build that just uses it as basically an extra store of glucose that you can just have. Because as you can see, hydrogen sulfide going down a steady pace, but the glucose is actually going up. And this will allow you to either just stay in one spot and allow compounds to spawn around you like this, or just give you that extra little bit of energy to travel through areas where there's no compounds. Now, this cell is perfectly fine. You can just give it like some little attachments, like maybe more flagellum to move a bit faster. You could maybe add more chemoreceptors and set them to find glucose in the environment just by itself, or if you're using iron to supplement your hydrogen sulfide, then you can have it set to that, or you can set it to find ammonia and phosphate, so you can try to find those compounds to reproduce faster and get to the next generation. And you could even try to go multicellular with signaling agents and binding agents, but I will say it's very difficult. It's difficult enough to keep your cell alive, for the most part reliant on hydrogen sulfide, but adding more cells to the mix is a sure way to end up growing a bit too big and dying as a result. The one interesting thing to get would actually be vacuoles, because vacuoles greatly increase the amount of storage space you have. So it goes from 10, add 2 of them, goes up to 26. Like, it is insane, and with the amount of ATP production we've got, it can easily be supported. And the good thing about having such a huge amount of storage is that you can use hydrogen sulfide to its fullest by just getting a really good stockpile of it built up. So right now I've got 27 hydrogen sulfide, and I'm not even halfway full on my glucose, but I can just sit here and watch the glucose tick up. And if I just keep on consuming a little bit of hydrogen sulfide, I mean, it keeps things going pretty good, and it can allow this cell to move around long distances without having to refuel. So yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to hydrogen sulfide builds. Do apologize for taking a bit longer to get this video out, and I think it's a bit lower quality than the other ones, because hydrogen sulfide is sort of a fun build to do, but I much prefer even the plant playstyle to it, because at least plants, you know, can consistently get enough food. You know, these guys are constantly struggling to get enough hydrogen sulfide from the environment, and you're stuck in really one of the patches. Like, the only other one with hydrogen sulfide, there's barely enough to even use it as a supplemental source of energy. But that will conclude this video. This cell is perfectly capable of surviving up to 20 generations, maybe with even a few modifications. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.